Hey guys, today's layout is walking you through scrapbooking your travel photos, specifically where food is concerned. Hi, I'm Katie Taylor at scrappinkaty.com, where I show you how to preserve your family's memories through the art of scrapbooking. Today's layout is going to be featuring some of the photos from our CDT trip last year. So when we went to Vancouver, and we ate at this little bitty coffee shop. We have a couple of girls who are gluten-free. And so we tried to find gluten-friendly restaurants. And Google was our friend. So Erin and Jama got online and researched and found these cute little quaint coffee shops and restaurants. And they were so good. Like, I buy gluten-free products, but I don't have to eat gluten-free. So, I kind of have what I like. And so that's all I ever know, the crackers that we eat, the bread, so on and so forth. But I really enjoyed eating at this place. And wouldn't you know it, it's called Ayers Pears. And so I have several photos here. I'm going to kind of walk through these photos as I use them, as I make the layout, to kind of tell you why I took them. But I am going to use the Painterly Pears suite or collection from Stampin' Up. And I think it's going to be perfect. I have some scraps here, but you can see just those gorgeous pears. The gorgeous color schemes that, or the gorgeous color scheme that's going on here. So we've got the DSP, got coordinating cardstock, and then I've also pulled in the Sweet Blooms. I am loving this for kind of like a little subtitle, Lovely Day. And then for my little embellishment clusters, I'm probably going to use the Spotlight on Nature. I'm going to kind of play around with, once I get the pears cut, see how big my circles have to be. If they have to be large, I'm probably going to cut them with this. Otherwise, I'm just going to use one of my Stampin' Up! Punches. And then, of course, there was coffee had. So I've pulled out the Latte Love. And I believe I have another stamp set from my stash that I'm going to go find. I may use that instead. But I love these little open coffee mugs. And even though the paper doesn't really match, I have a whole bunch of this punched. So I have these, and then I can just ink that center up with a coordinating color for the Painterly Pears. And then, I think that's it. Of course, I'll pull in some other stuff like I usually do once I get going, but this is where the layout is going to start. And again, I'm going to walk you through how to scrapbook your restaurant or your food photos from your travels, whether that be a girls trip or a trip with your family. I'm just going to kind of give you some of the things that I keep in mind as I'm taking the photos, as I'm going through them and culling them down, and as I'm cropping them. So stay tuned. This layout should be really cute and kind of unexpected, if you ask me. So stick around and let's see how this is all going to come together. So I have these already stamped pears from a project that I did last week, and I want to try and figure out the size of circle that I need. So I've pulled out the tried and true Spotlight on Nature, and I am just looking at this one design. My friend Erin calls it the paper plate design, and I am going to cut it from some wood grain specialty paper from Stampin' Up. So I've just pulled out a scrap piece of that, and I'm going to cut another one of that kind of middle-sized circle, as well as a small circle, because these are going to be the anchoring spots for my embellishment clusters. So the paper in the Painterly Pears also goes or coordinates with the die cuts from the pear bundle. And so I thought that I would just cut some and see if I want to use those or the stamped version. So I'm going to go ahead and cut the circles. Here's a look at that texture. I love that wood grain, but I like that it's white. And then I've just trimmed down some of that DSP, and I'm going to line up these die cuts and then just secure them to the paper with just some little flag Post-its. Now, I am going to cut this entire piece. I'm going to do that off camera. Won't subject you to that, but I just love when Stampin' Up! Dies coordinate with the paper. It just makes it where you can just die cut those pieces. You don't have to stamp, you don't have to color. Although, when I did stamp these pears, I felt like they stamped really, really nicely. There is this other little shape that comes with the Painterly Pears die cuts, and I just love it. It's a great background, so I have stamped a full sheet of some scratch cardstock. Now, as far as my coffee mugs, remember that this video is about scrapbooking food. So I have pulled out the Latte Love, and I already have some die cut shapes. So I'm pulling out a couple of the mugs. You can see there, one is a top view, and then the other is of the mug. Now there are some little smaller mugs, and in order to pick which one I think I'm going to use, I need to pull out the pears and kind of do a comparison for relative size. So I've decided against the little small mugs. And then I am going to go ahead and stamp that little heart circle. I am going to just stamp that on a scratch piece of paper. This is just a circle that I have punched using one of the punches from Stampin' Up. And I'm using an old Close to My Heart color. It is toffee. And then I'm just going to die cut that circle out. And then that will allow me to use that with that cup. Now, also, I wanted to include a book. Now, this was a little cafe. Of course, we did no reading. We did a whole lot of talking and planning our day, but I thought that it would be fun to include a book, especially if you are visiting while you're traveling, little restaurants or cafes that have like a built-in library, little embellishments in your clusters to basically spell out what you did that day or what you did in the photos are always a nice little addition. So I am going to die cut this little piece. Now this little piece is actually meant to be a tassel for the book. We will put that together by taking some twine. I'm going to tie a knot. I'm going to actually tie 3 knots to make that kind of a bigger knot. And then I have attached, or I'm going to attach this with some liquid adhesive along the top of this little tassel. So this tassel has some fringe at the bottom and then of course a solid piece at the top, and that is what my adhesive is on. And then I am just rolling this up. And then I have these tweezers that are kind of spring loaded. So I'm just going to clamp those down, and that is just going to sit off to the side while I build the rest of my layout. Now for the bottom of this book, I am attaching these white pages, and then I am going to go ahead and add some color to this. Now I believe that the cardstock that I used for this, I punched it a long time ago, so I want to say that it is Daffodil Delight, but I am using some of the Darling Duckling ink. I am going to mask off those white pages at the bottom and go ahead and add the ink. And I think it just kind of adds that same kind of color scheme that's on the pears. Now I have decided to go ahead and ink distress all of the DSP that I'm using on these layouts. I am using Secret Sea ink and then just a sponge to go ahead and sponge all around those. Now I will do this for this left layout. For the right layout, I'm going to do that off camera so you don't have to sit through it. But sponging is really something that just kind of adds some dimension. You can't really tell it on this dark piece, but on this piece, you really can tell it. And then there is going to be kind of a sidebar to this layout that's kind of a lighter color, and you'll be able to tell it as well. So I'm going to adhere that down, and then I'm going to start looking at my photos. Now I've already matted that on some white, but I'm trying to decide if I want to add another matte. I have decided to do that. So now I'm culling through my photos and trying to decide which ones will go on the left layout. I like this photo of all of us at the table, but you can notice that Chelsea is missing. So then I purposely, when we were leaving, took a picture of us and the reflection shows Chelsea. Now this photo just kind of shows the rest of the cafe, and then I've got some food photos. So I've got a couple of coffee photos you can see there. So I want those grouped together. And then I am going to use that coffee mug. I don't want the coffee mug on the layout with the coffee photos. That's just kind of overkill. So I've decided to use the photo of the menu on this left layout. Just like I was intentional of taking our reflection photo so Chelsea could be in it, I was intentional taking a photo of the menu. It's something I always like to do. Not only does it kind of tell you where you've been, but it also kind of gives you a glimpse not only of the menu items, but also of the prices. So when you're looking through this, in 30 or 40 years, you can see what the prices of food were. So here's that sidebar. I've centered that under the 4x6 portrait, and I am happy with that. So now I can start building these embellishment clusters. Now I am going to start with the coffee mug. I was just looking at the colors that are in the Painterly pairs. So I've pulled out some Stampin' blends. This is going to be the petal pink. I'm starting with the dark petal pink, and I am just kind of adding some highlights. Those are already in the stamped image. And then I'm coming back with the light petal pink and just kind of filling those in, and then coming back with the dark as well. One thing I love about the Stampin' Blends from Stampin' Up! Is you get 2 markers in every package. So that automatically gives you a light and a dark. After adding some of that petal pink to that little coffee swirl, I'm going to add some dimensional tape to the back of that just to kind of pop it up a little bit. This is the thinnest dimensional tape that I have, so it's not going to add a lot of bulk because there is also going to be some bulk in this little embellishment cluster. So now I'm going to start building the cluster. So I'm bringing out the pear, I'm bringing out that little background kind of cut that I did. I'm going to bring out the little flowers that were die cut from the DSP, as well as those little double pairs. And here's where I realize that the double pairs really cover up the coffee mug. So I'm going to pull out that second coffee mug. Remember, that is from the Latte Love. And I think that I'm going to use that instead. So I am going to mimic the same coloring using the light and dark petal pink. This one is the light, and I'm just covering this entire mug with it. And then I'm coming back with the dark. And again, you can see those little stamped lines that are automatic shading for you. And then I'm going to come back in with Timid Tiger. Now, Timid Tiger isn't really in this collection, but it is kind of a darker color. And you can see in that DSP underneath our photos, there definitely is a darker kind of peach color. Now, I am covering everything up with that dark petal pink again, and then I'm going to attach the coffee for this mug. Now, I am going to flip this around to make it just look a little bit better, and then I'm going to start attaching everything. Now, I prefer to attach my 3D foam tape to my layout base and then go ahead and add that circle. You can see there. Now, I have put that down where it's not straight up and down. It's kind of off to the side. And then I'm going to start layering these little embellishments or these little cuts. Now, some will be adhered directly to that little circle, and some will be using some dimensions, whether that's 3D foam tape, the thin, or the dimensionals from Stampin' Up. I am going to straighten this cup up just a bit and then kind of add those smaller pairs at an angle. And then I'm going to come back in with this piece. Remember, this is one of my favorite, and I cut enough. Like, I think I used 3 on this page or this layout, but I have like 3 more that I can use on cards or maybe another layout. So I've added that kind of tucked into under the pear, but on top of the circle. And then I am going to take the Secret Sea blend. I believe this one is the light one. And I'm just coloring in the edges of this floral piece. Now, this smaller circle is going to go at the top of my layout. So I have attached that, and then I'm just going to trim off the excess. And then I am going to mimic the same little embellishments that I did on the larger circle. Now, for the pairs on this one, I'm only using the 2 pairs, and it is up at the top, just adding dimensionals to that. And then on that little blank space off to the right, I will add some of those flower pieces. I am going to go ahead and tuck some of those pink flowers down at that bottom cluster, and then I'll come back in the end and kind of finish those clusters up. Now, for the right layout, you can see I've already put that together, but I need to line up my photos. So I'm trying to decide which one is going to go on the left. And I think it's going to be of this one with my coffee cup and my cookie, because the other 3x4 has a blank spot under it, and that's of my sandwich and my sweet potato chips. And the reason I did this is because there is going to be another cluster. Now, because this little cluster is going to be nestled in underneath that plate of food, and then remember that 4x4 photo of all the coffees? That little cluster is going to go right there. And so I need to make sure that I'm not hiding too much of the photo. So I'm liking this placement here. So I'm going to go ahead and put that circle down, and then I'm going to stamp my subtitle. Now, this stamp comes from the, what is that? Sweet Blooms stamp set. So there is this big word that is lovely, and I'm trying to decide what color I'm going to use. Originally, I was going to use Secret C, but then I've pulled out just another image from the Sweet Blooms, and I am just stamping in Timid Tiger. I've done that first and second generation, and then I've also brought in Calypso Coral, trying to decide which one I'm going to use. So here I've decided I want to use the second generation of Timid Tiger, but I was so excited to make this choice that I didn't do second generation. I end up liking it, but I do figure out here in just a second that, oops, I didn't do that right. Now, these little small sentiments say it's a lovely day, and of course I've inked those up in the Secret C. Now, for my little cluster, I've built the majority of it offline or off camera, but I need a pair and I want that book to show. And so I am just cutting a single pair from the DSP. Because I had to cut it apart, there's no room to leave a white border. So I'm just going to attach that to a scrap piece of white cardstock and then cut around it, leaving a white border, and you can never tell. It matches all the rest. So if you're ever in a spot where you want everything to match, but you need to cut something a little bit closer, then just attach it to some white cardstock. I am attaching that with some dimensionals to that little cluster, and then we are going to go ahead and fill in the missing parts to match that white or that left layout that we've already done. Now, there are some sentiments from the weekend adventures that I want to use. One of the little word place or the words is love this place. And I want to ink that up and put that kind of in between the two 3x4 photos that are at the top. So I'm trying to decide if I want to ink that up in Timid Tiger first or second generation, or if I want to use my go-to color, which is Secret C. So I've just stamped those down on some scratch pieces or a scratch piece of cardstock. And then there are these little bitty X's that I absolutely love. I'm going to ink those up in Secret C and stamp those on opposite corners of that white base that is showing through. There's also this tiny little heart, and I'm going to add it to the book. And then I am going to attach that little dovetailed love this place. I love how that just kind of spans those two photos. Now for the left layout, I've already done the little X's, but I wanted to add this little sentiment which says better together. And then I am going to go ahead and attach my little tassel. So I'm going to trim off that piece and then get that attached down. And then for my journaling, I am using the Just a Note stamp set. This is a cling stamp set. So I'm going to mask off the right side with that scratch piece and then mask off the bottom portion with a Post-it note. and then ink that up in Secret C and just kind of stamp that off to the side. Now, for the right layout, I am going to bring it in and kind of line that up next to the left one, and then that way those journaling lines will span across. My journaling will be for the left layout and then separate journaling for the right, but aesthetically, I wanted these lines to be straight across from each other. Now, there definitely is an up and a down to the stamp, so I realized that and I flipped it and then just going to ink that down, and I love it. Now, on the left layout, you'll notice that it didn't ink down all the way. So there's this little bitty heart that I used. I'm going to add 2 of those hearts and then 1 over on the right, so it looks like it was done on purpose. And then for the rest of my title, I've pulled out my acrylic letters and I'm going to use the white ones. And it's going to say Ayers Pears, which is the name of the restaurant that we ate at. The last little detail for this layout is going to be attaching some of the low profile sparkle dots that come with the Painterly Pears suite. I absolutely love these. You get 2 sizes and you can see you've got the blue, the green, and the yellow. I am using that deep blue that kind of matches the Secret C, and I'm adding 2 small and then 1 of the larger ones around each cluster. And so that is going to pull in kind of that rule of thirds, and again on each cluster. And then I just think it adds that perfect amount of sparkle and then also finishes off these clusters really nicely. Here is a look at that completed layout with my title, and then I'm going to show you some close-ups of these little embellishment clusters since I did a lot of that off camera. I absolutely love that I was able to use this suite with these photos and then also kind of tell a story with the photos and be intentional about the photos, not only that I took, of the menu and the coffee and the reflection, but also able to crop those photos down so that my embellishment clusters went over them without hiding the photo. Thank you so much for stopping by and watching. Remember, if you liked what you saw, hit that like button, share with your friends, leave a comment, and if you aren't already a subscriber, hit that subscribe button and sign up for notifications so you won't miss another crafty video. I hope y'all have a wonderful weekend.